Mom. Wake up, Mom.
How much time has passed since I fell asleep? Suddenly shaken awake, I jump up. Forcing my heavy eyelids open, I see that Melissa is kneeling on the bed and shaking me. Melissa, what's wrong? It's still the middle of the night, right? The clock shows it's 2 a.m. Far from morning, in the darkest hours of the night. Ignoring my reluctance, Melissa pulls me off the bed.
Hurry up. Just come here.
She grabs my hand and drags me into the closet in the room. Slamming the door shut, she gently peers through a crack to look into the room. Fearfully, I peek out too, frightened by Melissa's panicked state. "Ach." Melissa stops me from screaming out loud. My body starts trembling, and I'm frozen, fixated on the scene in the room. My name is Yolanda Kimball. I'm a 48-year-old homemaker. 5 years ago, I married my current husband, Stuart, and became a stay-at-home wife. Before getting married, I worked in IT, so my 20s and 30s were spent immersed in my job with hardly any social life. But that all changed when I collaborated on a project with Stuart, who was in sales at another company. Stuart taught me a lot, things I never knew while focused solely on work. As our relationship deepened, I learned he had a daughter from his late wife. To be honest, I was taken aback, having almost no previous experience with men. Sensing my unease, Stuart reassured me, saying, "You don't have to accept this if you can't." He left the decision up to me and continued our relationship. No matter how sensitive Stuart was, the facts didn't change. While I was still struggling with whether I could keep dating him, I finally met Stuart's daughter. When I first met Melissa, she was 12. Right in that sensitive middle school phase. Seeing me for the first time, she neither showed animosity or seemed to like me. She just kept up a front of indifference. In fact, she probably couldn't care less about me. With her real mom having passed away recently, she didn't warm up to me at all. She also didn't seem open with her dad, Stuart. At that time, I took it optimistically, thinking she had a lot on her mind. Meeting Melissa seemed to have stirred determination within me instead. The hurdle of marrying a man with a stepchild had gradually disappeared. I even made a naive resolution: I need to make her happy. When Stuart heard my resolve, he was thrilled and proposed almost immediately. Of course, I accepted, and I became Stuart's wife and Melissa's stepmother. Soon after, I moved into the house Stuart and Melissa shared. I had visited many times before, but now it would be my home too. Stuart had bought this house shortly after Melissa was born. It's a typical 2-story house, but it's more than enough for the 3 of us to live in. Once I settled in, I began to notice things I hadn't when I was just visiting. Traces of Stuart's late wife were everywhere in the house. Even knowing she had passed away, seeing all these remnants tormented me. Various lotions remained in the bathroom's vanity. The closet in the master bedroom was still stocked with her makeup. I'm not superstitious, but whenever I came across her belongings, I couldn't help feeling like she was still somehow present in the house. Stuart, oblivious to my unease, didn't seem to notice my confusion. When I mentioned her things to him, he casually replied, "If they're in the way, just toss them." Even with his permission, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Wiping out traces of his late wife would be unfair to Melissa, her daughter. Despite my discomfort, I decided to leave her belongings as they were. A new life had begun, and there was something else I started to notice. It was the way Stuart was treating me and Melissa. Before we got married, I was caught up in the heat of things and didn't pay attention, but it became clear that Stuart was avoiding Melissa. I didn't know why. However, it was obvious that his feelings toward her were showing through in his actions. Besides that, his attitude toward me changed, too. He didn't belittle me or say terrible things, but it was clear that his passion for me had cooled. He kept saying work was hard and barely came home before midnight on weekdays. Sometimes he would even stay at the office overnight. We used to go on dates during the week or spend time with Melissa at home, but once we got married, his homecoming time changed. I hated to think this, but it was clear Stuart was foisting Melissa on me. I didn't know the details, but it seemed Stuart wasn't too fond of his ex-wife. And because of that, his hostility was directed at her daughter, Melissa. Did Stuart only see me as a convenient housekeeper to dump Melissa on? Didn't he love me at all? Even though Melissa spent more time with me, she didn't really open up to me. She didn't talk back or refuse to listen, but she still treated me like a stranger. I understood it wouldn't be easy to accept a new mom with just a simple okay. But I knew this situation wasn't good for either of us. Plus, I was worried about Stuart's attitude. Without any time to enjoy our new marriage, my head became full of worries. Despite my mixed feelings, I tried my best every day. I got up at 5 a.m. every morning to make Melissa's lunch. After preparing breakfast for Stuart and Melissa and sending them off, I did the laundry and cleaning. My lunch was just leftovers from the night before as I went shopping and prepped for dinner. In this hectic daily routine, there was no time to slowly face my worries. I didn't know if that was a good or bad thing, but as this life went on, I realized 5 years had passed. Melissa was now an 18-year-old high school senior, facing college entrance exams. Even in this situation, Stuart didn't care much about her and left things like parent-teacher meetings up to me. Melissa still hadn't fully opened up to me, but she seemed to be communicating with me a bit more than before. She said thanks when I made her lunch and sometimes helped with housework. Though we didn't say much to each other, this was enough for me. This distance between us was comfortable. One day, Melissa suddenly said,
I threw out the former mom's old skincare stuff from the bathroom. I'll take care of the closet too, so can I go in?
The fact that she said the former mom showed how considerate she was of me. How did Melissa know that the closet was full of her mom's old things? I felt a little puzzled, but I figured it was a good opportunity and asked Melissa to handle them. Sorry to make you worry, you don't have to force yourself to throw your mom's stuff away. I said, trying to be as considerate as possible, but Melissa quickly dismissed my concerns.
Don't worry. We should have taken care of these things much earlier.
With those words, Melissa packed everything from the closet into a trash bag. I had mixed feelings, but I understood it was an important step for Melissa to find closure with her emotions. Accepting this, I sincerely thanked her. Not long after that, I hit a new wall. I discovered that Stuart was cheating. The clues that gave it away were nothing out of the ordinary. I realized I was out of a key seasoning needed for Melissa's lunch, so I rushed to the grocery store just before closing. After grabbing what I needed and heading home, I noticed Stuart walking ahead of me, with a young woman by his side. At first, I thought she might be a subordinate from work, but the way they interacted was clearly not a boss-employee relationship. They were obviously lovers. My instincts told me so. I discreetly followed them. As expected, they ended up at a hotel. Naturally, I was furious and deeply shocked. But a part of me wasn't entirely surprised. It was as if I'd been on the verge of giving up. This figures, I thought. Stuart had been shoving Melissa onto me while cozying up to other women like this. He hadn't divorced me because he needed me to look after Melissa. To him, I was nothing more than a housekeeper. Dejected, I went home and started contemplating what lay ahead for Melissa and me. Should I tell her the truth about what I'd just seen? But even if I did, what could Melissa, still a minor, possibly do? She'd only be hurt. Realizing this, I decided to just let Stuart's actions slide. It was the best thing for both Melissa and me. Though I'd initially thought Stuart had pawned Melissa off on me, I knew I cared about her. Now, I felt ashamed for even thinking that way. I was back home and calm, guilt overwhelmed me. The night passed without a wink of sleep, and soon the sun was up. I began preparing Melissa's lunch like usual. Apparently, Stuart hadn't come home again. His excuse of staying at work was a lie, and he was likely still in that hotel with the woman from last night. With that gloomy thought, I prepared breakfast. Surprisingly, Melissa came down the stairs an hour earlier than usual.
Morning.
I quickly arranged the leftover lunch items on a plate and set them at her seat. Sorry, did you need to head out early today? When I asked, Melissa shook her head and said, no.
Sorry for rushing you. I just have somewhere to go. And I think Dad will be back tonight.
As she spoke, she kept eating the breakfast I prepared. Once she ate the breakfast and said thanks for the meal, she quickly headed for the front door. Here, your lunch. I handed the lunch box to Melissa as she was putting on her shoes. Taking it, she looked at me and said thanks.
I know everything, so don't worry.
With that, she dashed out the door. What did she mean by I know everything? Given the timing, it must be about Stuart's affair. But how did she find out? Maybe she'd known all along and had kept quiet for my sake. Just as I had tried to protect her by hiding the truth, Melissa was doing the same for me. She didn't elaborate, but I was sure of it. She really had grown up to be a wonderful daughter. Despite what happened, my heart felt oddly full. But where was she off to so early in the morning? Could she be planning to confront Stuart and that woman? Melissa is a smart girl and wouldn't do anything reckless, but I was worried. I spent the whole day anxiously waiting for her to come home. In the evening, Melissa returned, seemingly her usual self, as if nothing had happened that morning. I decided not to bring it up and acted as usual. Then, as we finished dinner, something unexpected happened.
I'm home.
Just like Melissa had said that morning, Stuart had returned. And much earlier than usual.
I already ate out.
He said while glancing sideways at Melissa and me, then hurried off to the bathroom. When I gave Melissa a puzzled look, she nodded meaningfully.
Feeling tired. I'm going to bed.
After coming out of the bathroom, Stuart went straight to the bedroom. I gave a soft good night and watched him leave. He'd never come home this early before. What could have happened? I had so many questions, but Melissa's eyes seemed to say, "Don't ask." We cleaned up after dinner as usual and took turns heading to the bathroom. I could sense something was about to happen, but I didn't know what. With a strange sense of dread hanging over me, I stepped into the bedroom where Stuart was asleep. What is this? As soon as I opened the bedroom door, a foul atmosphere wafted out. The air was hard to describe, but it felt somewhat fishy. The bedroom was unusually chilly at a low temperature, despite it being spring. The cold wasn't just in my head. I realized it was natural for my body to start shivering. Looking at Stuart lying on the bed, he was snoring, completely unaware of any changes. Maybe it was because we hadn't slept together in a while that I hadn't noticed the change in his body odor. Though I felt a bit uneasy about sharing the bed, I couldn't withstand the chill and slipped under the covers. The eerie atmosphere didn't dissipate, but for some reason, a wave of drowsiness suddenly washed over me as soon as I got in bed. What is this? I usually don't sleep well, and it's even earlier than my usual bedtime tonight. Yet I could barely keep my eyes open. Unable to resist the heaviness in my eyelids, I soon drifted off to sleep.
Mom. Mom, wake up.
How long had I been asleep? Suddenly shaken awake, I sat up with a start. Opening my heavy eyelids with effort, I saw Melissa kneeling on the bed, shaking me. "Melissa, what's going on? It's still the middle of the night, right?" Unable to grasp the situation, I groggily looked at the clock next to the bed. It read 2 a.m. Still a long way from morning. Ignoring my reluctance, Melissa pulled me off the bed.
Hurry. Just come over here.
Melissa grabbed my hand and dragged me into the closet in the room. Still confused, I found myself huddled inside the closet with her. It's the middle of the night. As I tried to speak, Melissa covered my mouth. About 5 minutes after we entered the closet, I started hearing noises coming from the room. Melissa cautiously cracked open the closet door and peeked outside. The faint light in the room illuminated her face, allowing me to see her expression. Melissa's eyes were wide open, and her face was marked with fear. As my mind slowly cleared, I gently placed my hand on her shoulder. Startled, Melissa looked back at me, then pointed to the crack in the door, urging me to look outside. Trembling, I cautiously peeked out of the closet. "Ach!" I nearly cried out, but Melissa managed to stifle my voice once again. My body trembled, and I was transfixed by the sight in the room. Through the crack, I saw the bed where we had been sleeping. Stuart was still sleeping on it, but next to him stood a woman. Normally, I'd think she was his mistress, but one look told me otherwise. The woman isn't a living human. Something inside me is screaming that at full speed. The woman stands over a sleeping Stuart, peering down through her long, draped black hair. Melissa didn't say a word, but I could tell the woman was Stuart's ex-wife. If I listened closely, I could hear the ex-wife whispering something into Stuart's ear. Though I couldn't make out her words, each time she spoke, Stuart's body twitched. This scene played out over and over before my eyes, but neither Melissa or I could move. Before I knew it, light started to shine into the room. The night was breaking. The ex-wife's form gradually became fainter, harder to distinguish. Once her figure disappeared completely, my body finally responded. Melissa and I scrambled out of the closet and left the room. We went downstairs to the living room, and as I collapsed onto the couch, I realized my pajamas were drenched in sweat. The thin t-shirt Melissa was wearing had soaked up enough sweat to change color. We both sat in stunned silence for a while, before Melissa hesitantly spoke up.
"Did you see her?" She was furious.
She said that with some difficulty, stringing the words together. "Did you save me?" When I asked that, Melissa nodded slowly.
"The former mom resents Dad. He neglected her while she was sick and was having an affair."
From what Melissa explained to me after, the ex-wife apparently holds a grudge against me too. Of course she would. I was the one he had an affair with. Stuart had indeed told me he'd been married before, and that his wife had passed, but he'd never said she was still alive at the time. I was deceived from the start. Back then, he probably thought of me as just a fling. A woman to be used as he saw fit, to look after his daughter. That's likely what he had in mind. I didn't know anything, but it's only natural for her to hate me. I was definitely the woman who took her husband away while she was suffering from illness.
"But I went to her grave this morning and asked her."
Melissa said this to me, who was cowering with a pale face. There was a reason the ex-wife showed herself like that today. In fact, today is the memorial of her passing. Melissa said she visited her mom's grave and spoke about me. Apparently, Melissa had inherited a mysterious ability from the ex-wife. She had a similar ability when she was alive, and often saw ghosts. The reason Melissa suddenly started getting rid of the ex-wife's belongings recently was to protect me as much as possible.
As the memorial day got closer, the former mom's presence got stronger. "I hate Dad too, but I don't hate you. You were a victim, deceived by him.
Apparently, the ex-wife had influenced Stuart to come back home yesterday. An unknown, mysterious power brought Stuart back to this house. Though he hasn't woken up yet, Melissa asserted that Stuart won't get away with it.
Dad will surely be taken too.
Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but she quickly clarified.
When I say taken, I mean just his mind.
At the time, I didn't quite understand what Melissa meant, but her calm demeanor suggested that it wouldn't be the worst-case scenario. I don't know how long we had been talking, but Melissa had completely forgotten about going to school. It's impossible to think of studying in such a situation. When I checked the clock, it was 8:30 a.m. It was about time for Stuart to go to work. As I hesitated whether to wake him, Stuart came stomping down the stairs. It was hard to tell if his grogginess was due to sleepiness or the events of last night. However, it was clear that he was not his usual self. With a vacant look in his eyes, Stuart slumped into his seat at the kitchen table.
Dad, aren't you going to say anything? Mom came last night, right?
As she stood up from the sofa, Melissa walked up to Stuart and said that. At Melissa's words, a flicker of life returned to Stuart's eyes. But it quickly turned into a wild glare as he stood up, knocking his chair over.
What are you talking about?
He was clearly unsettled by the mention of Mom came. The words sent a shock through him, snapping him back to reality, but fear soon took over.
At first, I thought I'd help Dad too. But then, you cheated again and showed no remorse. You didn't care about Mom, nor did you feel bad about the former mom.
Accused by his own daughter, Stuart became even more furious. Everything Melissa said hit the mark.
Are you disrespecting your parent?
As Stuart lunged to strike her, I quickly intervened. The next moment, my hand struck Stuart's cheek. Enough. Stop showing us such a pitiful sight. As I hit him, I shouted those words. The fury in his eyes flickered for a moment, but then receded. He couldn't believe he was being scolded by me. Moreover, he was deeply hurt, more than I could have imagined. Your daughter knew everything you thought you had cleverly hidden. She knew all about how you neglected your sick wife to have an affair. I unleashed everything Melissa had told me upon Stuart. Melissa had endured the bitterness of her dying mother's resentment, watched her suffer to her last breath. The pain of living with Stuart, who had abandoned them, and the confusion of being raised by the woman who had taken her real mother away. Melissa had been bearing all these feelings alone. Have some shame. It's unbelievable that such a small man could be her father. Now that I know everything, I can't stay like this. Thinking of Melissa fighting alone, tears began to spill from my eyes.
Don't talk nonsense. I didn't abandon her. It's not my fault.
Stuart turns pale, yet he still doesn't want to reflect on his actions. However, it's because he feels guilty that he's this upset. Who's the one lying here? You married me, cheated with another woman, and have the nerve to say that. What's so great about such a pathetic man anyway? Looking at Stuart, who's panicking in front of me, I feel nauseated.
Mom was always mad. She'd curse Dad every day while lying in bed. I don't even consider you my father anymore, so I asked Mom to take you with her.
Melissa murmurs quietly, and Stuart's face becomes even paler. The events from earlier are flashing back in his head, and fear is sweeping through his body once again. It's too late to apologize now. I'll explain everything to your mistress and your workplace, so don't worry, and off you go. It's over. Suddenly, those words come out of my mouth. Even though the sun is up, the room starts to darken. The lights have gone out, and a lukewarm wind is blowing from somewhere. That unpleasant smell from last night begins to waft through the room again.
She's here. Mom's here.
Although Melissa says that, I can't see his ex-wife like I did last night. It seems that Melissa can't see her either. Only Stuart, staring wide-eyed at a single point, sees her standing right there.
No. I didn't abandon you. Yes, I was deceived by her.
Although Stuart collapses on the floor, he points at me and yells. He's trying to say that I was having an affair with him despite knowing about his ex-wife. But that's a complete lie.
So please, forgive me. If you need to resent someone, take her away.
Stuart cries and screams, pleading desperately to his invisible ex-wife. I see that he has wet himself.
Yolanda, please. I love you.
Stuart clings to me with a pathetic voice. Instinctively, I swat his reaching hand away. Don't touch me, I don't love you at all. Even though Stuart's spained cries continue, his gaze shifts more and more. He's closing the gap with his ex-wife.
Goodbye, Dad.
Just as Melissa says that, a gust of wind filled with that awful smell blows through the room. I close my eyes for a moment, but when I open them again, everything is back to normal. Everything except Stuart, that is. The room regains its brightness, but Stuart is still on the floor, staring blankly into space.
Og.
His mouth is gaping open, and drool is dripping from the corners. Stuart keeps muttering meaningless words, as if he can't see us anymore.
Mom took Dad's mind with her.
Staring intently at her now broke-in father, Melissa says this quietly. It was over. Now his ex-wife would no longer appear in this house. I didn't know much, but I was sure of this. The gloomy atmosphere that had filled the house disappeared, replaced by a refreshing air. Melissa, thank you. Because of me, your mom met such an unfortunate end. I said this, and hugged Melissa.
It's all Dad's fault. Mom did nothing wrong. Plus, my former mom understands now.
Melissa murmured in my arms, stroking my back. Leaving Stuart in his broken state, we hugged each other for a long time. After that, I called an ambulance and had Stuart taken to the hospital. Seeing Stuart still unable to communicate, the doctor was deeply shocked. According to the doctor, there's no hope for recovery.
Did he suffer a sudden shock? This isn't normal.
The doctor asked, but there was no way I could tell the truth, so I evaded answering. Maybe sensing my reluctance, he didn't press me further.
I've been a doctor for a long time and have seen some strange things. Perhaps there's some supernatural element beyond our understanding.
We discussed Stuart's future, but I had no intention of caring for him, so we decided to admit him to a nearby psychiatric hospital. Even though it's hospitalization, Stuart will probably never get out. After finishing the paperwork, I went home and told Melissa about the situation. She didn't object to my decision at all.
I think that's fine. I don't want to see him anymore, and I'm not planning to take care of him either. I want you to live your own life from now on,
she said, with a hint of sadness. She probably thought that her presence was tying me to this house. I'll always be with you, Melissa, even though Stuart ended up like that. Our relationship won't change. I had come to truly love Melissa, and I was sure this feeling wouldn't change in the future. Melissa, still a minor, was just putting up a brave front. Deep down, she didn't want to be alone. Crying, she kept whispering, "Thank you." A new life with Melissa began. At her request, we left the house where she had spent time with Stuart and his ex-wife. If we stayed, she'd be reminded of too many things she'd rather forget. We rented a small room, far from spacious, to make a fresh start together. Melissa passed her exams and was accepted into the college she had wanted to attend. This spring, she became a college student. I, who had been a stay-at-home mom, returned to work to support her. Since I work on the computer, I have more time to work from home, which has also increased the time I spend with Melissa. Even though I began working, we could live comfortably on Stuart's savings and long-term care insurance. He had saved up a lot, intending to build a new home with his mistress somewhere else. Since I hadn't divorced him for Melissa's sake, the money naturally came to me. Of course, I plan to use that money for Melissa, but I'll also earn as much as possible myself. Returning to work hasn't made our lives more difficult. Instead, it's given me a greater sense of purpose. My relationship with Melissa has deepened even further, and my former indifference now seems like a lie.
Mom. Remember you promised we'd go to the movies tomorrow, right? You didn't forget, did you?
We now go out together often, and Melissa has become much more cheerful. Even though I didn't know better, I had taken Melissa's life with his ex-wife away. But the two of them have forgiven me, allowing me to enjoy these happy days. Grateful for this miraculous everyday life, I'll continue to protect Melissa, my daughter. No matter what challenges await us, I'm confident we can overcome them. Seeing Melissa's smile only makes that conviction stronger.